This morning, I'd like to introduce Eric Peterson. And I've got a little bit of a story as we talk about customer success as competitive advantage. Eric and I worked together many years ago. And like a lot of us, we met late night on Slack. And so I would be online, Eric would be online, and we got talking, and Eric was always sharing customer success stories. And so I just realized, oh my God, there's so much I didn't know. And what made it more interesting is the company we're at had zero churn. And I've never seen that before. And his magic in doing, everything was just, it was intoxicating to me. And what we realized with SAMI is we've covered a lot of AI and then we've covered a lot of practical stuff. And today we kind of bring AI and practical stuff together under customer success. And we had Dom Colasanti from 2X last fall for a webinar, and he gets it. He's got a high growth company, and he talked about one of the pillars of his company. He talked about three pillars, but one, he said, customer success is so important and so underappreciated, so underinvested. And Eric's going to help us get clarity on what customer success is, what it means in the AI age, and what everybody can do, pretty much to get this whole thing going. Think about it. The cost of customer acquisition is so extreme. Once you lose a customer, it gets pretty sad, and the board's not going to be very, very happy. So, Eric, I am going to turn it over to you. Eric's going to introduce himself and go through a fairly exciting slide deck on customer success. I think we all have a lot to learn here. Eric, to you.
Did you say fairly exciting, Rob? I think
Okay.
you meant very exciting.
The-
Can you guys see my screen?
yes.
Great. All right. A little about me. Like Rob and a few others of you, I have been in the B2B world for many years and spent a long time in success, support, customer ops, and one of the patterns that I've seen over and over and over um, is that issues really live across multiple teams. And so the work I tend to do is to diagnose where trust is breaking down with customers, fix the system, and then build some operating rhythm with tools so it stays fixed. So we're going to distill that approach today as we kind of go through the slides. One thing I hope is if you guys have questions, shout them out. I am definitely a more of a dialogue kind of guy. So
That's great, Eric. This is not usually a shy group, so please do shout it out. And people actively use the chat, which we can also keep an eye on for you too, Eric.
Awesome. All right. So what we're going to cover today, why retention is under attack, the hidden causes of churn, detecting trust erosion with your customers, a maturity model that will sort of shore up those areas, and then how AI can sort of play in smaller and sort of mid-sized companies. The big guys, we're not going to cover that today. All right, so churn's expensive, but let me frame why it's so unforgiving right now. First, as Rob was touching on, churn compounds. Not only do you lose the revenue when the customer churns, but you lose future revenue, you lose the opportunity to expand. And if you're living in your world, Dave, in Startupville, you lose runway. And so if it's one of your bigger customers, the impact is, pricing power, referrals, and it can be incredibly painful. And secondly, switching costs have collapsed with the age of AI. It's so much easier for folks to switch and identify competitors of yours that are maybe not having the feature that they find irritating in your set of products, but it works better somewhere else. It's easy to find that stuff now. And so as a result, the friction turns into action very fast. And finally, AI is letting customers solve problems without you. If you don't have a monolithic product, they can vibe code their way into a small product that solves some of their problems. So it's just putting so much more pressure on CS and your businesses to make sure that there's a much tighter loop around discovery and resolution for some of these small problems, which turn into churn later. All right, Rob, let's see some poll.
All right, let me restart this. Sorry. All right, folks, feel free to chime in and get your answer there. All right, stuff is coming in. Here we go, Eric. There are the results. Any surprises?
Did everybody see the results?
Yep.
Okay. I'm surprised there's not more folks. Sadly surprised there's not more folks who have a better runway for when they might see churn. So hopefully some of the takeaway here will give you guys a few tools or at least a few ideas to go back to your day jobs and identify some of those some things more easily. All right. All right. So the macro pressure here is expectations have exploded, particularly in the world with AI. Customers want faster value, faster answers, clearer outcomes, less friction. As I mentioned, switching costs are evaporating, and I think that's only going to accelerate. Customers can easily compare vendors, troubleshoot issues, pressure test claims from sales and marketing. Is what they're hearing really true about your product? And the big idea here is that retention has become a speed to signal problem, where in the past it was more of a relationship problem. Relationships are obviously still critical, but if those signals don't get acted on more quickly, there's going to be churn. So much easier, Rob, when I say next slide, please.
Sorry.
All right, I want to be blunt here. And this is sort of the historical view of customer success. It is not a renewal function. When people hear CS, they often think renewals. But I want to widen that lens. The real job of that post-sales team is revenue protection and revenue expansion. There's a difference. If customers are getting value, they stay, they expand. If things go sideways, how you handle those moments determines whether the relationship gets stronger or it fractures. And that's CS is that coordination layer. And if those signals are coming in and the reaction is fast enough, you have an opportunity, if handled well, to improve the relationship even through a difficult event.
So Eric, I spoke with about a dozen companies last week, at the excuse me, the CEO level and the C-suite. And I was asking in preparation for the call, I was asking about customer success, and all of them echoed, yeah, they're reviewing it as a renewal. I mean, how do we get this mindset to change? I mean, it seems to be the board is putting pressure on them. The CEO, that's the playbook now. CS equals renewal. And that's probably the biggest thing and all of them complain about churn.
Well, we're gonna. I mean, literally after this slide, we're gonna do a poll for folks to chime in on where they think churn starts. And I think that's part of the problem. They're really just at the executive level. Folks view CS as the bin that customers go to once the sale's done, the onboarding's done, the product's released, etc. And all those other teams sort of hold their nose and say, "Well, it's your problem now." I mean, I had an executive VP of engineering tell me, I'm not going to fix that bug. We're not going to fix that bug. And it's a critical bug that customers kept hitting. There's a workaround, but they hated it because that's your problem now. I mean,
Gotcha. Thanks.
it's laughable, but that's the attitude of a lot of exec teams. Go figure it out. It's your problem. And so, I think there needs to be more engagement cross-functionally on handling customers. I've always said customer success is a team sport. CS is the tip of the spear, but without the rest of the team, it's a fool's errand.
Yeah, so Eric, some comments in the chat, good ones as well. Bob, good good comment. Too many people think customer success, think customer service is customer success. You're going to talk about the difference in a little bit. And then Peter asked, you'll likely talk about it, but you believe CS should have a revenue expansion goal as well as renewals?
I'm actually not going to cover that, but I do believe that is true. There should be goals that should be comped. But I'm not going to cover it today, unfortunately. It's not part of the remit with my 45 minutes of talking time. All right, Rob, poll time.
All right. Poll number 2. Where does churn begin? Yeah, once a sale is made.
Yeah, it's a great question as everybody's kind of thinking about their answers here and filling them in. And I think Zoom polls doesn't let you do multiple responses, but it's, to your point, like the renewals, everybody's business. Renewals is a team sport. Customer success is a team sport. So just interesting to see where folks are going to see the biggest, the biggest culprit here.
All right.
Yeah, there was a bit of leading the witness by me by talking about it's not just customer success, right? So,
Oh, interesting. Thoughts on this, Eric?
well, I'm surprised nobody picked structured churn. No one's ever worked through an acquisition where they had an incumbent product at the bigger company. Yeah, I mean, I'm a little surprised onboarding is so high. Maybe there's some work to do across companies with onboarding. But yeah, I mean, there's some of these are much lower than I think what reality is, which we a recent study was done. I've got some data. I'll show that in a couple of slides, but it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to see the reaction when folks see that the slide data on what was found when looking at the actual data.
Right. I was just going to say, like, for the folks who, said the onboarding execution gaps, feel free to throw your experiences in the chat too, like what you've seen and what made you vote in that direction. So be curious to see that.
Yeah, just on that one, Pam. This is, having lived in the startup world, as well. There's times when you're making financial choices that you just have to make. And
right.
A great comment by Aaron about onboarding execution, something that crosses many departments. Parallel challenges for sure.
Okay, newsflash. Most churn is not caused by CS. It shows up in customer success, obviously, but it's caused elsewhere. Sales and marketing overpromising, onboarding gaps, which obviously folks have experienced, product friction, support breakdowns, operational failures where production operations is having a hard time keeping the product up and running consistently. All of those things caused trust debt, and CS becomes the messenger and the cleanup crew of all those problems. And in a lot of businesses, as we were alluding to earlier, that's viewed as the job. But obviously CS can't fix all those root causes alone. And unless you've got an executive team who's open to hearing, hey, sales is telling customers this, and that's it's eventually going to cause churn because we aren't going to be able to manage around that promise. You're just going to struggle to retain customers. So that loop of being open to hearing that across functional teams, and then solving some of those problems permanently is really where you get traction on reducing some of this churn.
Yeah, one of the things that we talk about, and I'm looking at Bob's comment about looking for ways to disqualify you right away. For marketers on the, basically on the call, if you think your marketing job stops when you've closed the customer, your marketing job is actually just beginning. And we forget about the importance of your marketing to your customer base. They become your advocates, they stick with you, and they want to hear that. And so this just we all have a role of supporting, to Eric's point, supporting customer success here.
Yeah, Rob, that's something you and I talked about a few weeks ago, and it's I describe it everywhere I've been. It's a struggle to get marketing to engage because most marketers are measured by incoming opportunities to sell new product. They're not measured by supporting the existing revenue that's paying all the bills currently, and it's really just a missed opportunity to make those relationships better, self promote the business to the existing customers. All right, so this is the part that a lot of teams are struggling with. Customers don't wake up one day and just be like, and just say to themselves, I'm out of here. Peterson Inc. Isn't working for me anymore, and they decide to leave. They start to drift. They've got an issue that happens between teams, one team, another team. The promises begin with sales and marketing, and maybe there's a feature that we pre-sold that isn't quite released yet. Then onboarding begins. Then the customers are trying to adopt. Then they hit support moments. They find that bug that's really important to them, and they despise the workaround, but product doesn't care to fix it. Every one of those transitions is a handoff, and the handoffs our expectations collide with reality. And sometimes ownership on those gets fuzzy, like the bug situation. The customer thinks support owns getting their bug fixed, but support really has no power in getting those bugs fixed. And so, those small friction bits, cause customers to slowly disengage. And unless those friction bits are addressed, over time, they disengage more quietly, then their commitment gets lower, and eventually it comes towards renewal time and they don't want to renew. So those small trust withdrawals that are occurring, they eventually can lead to churn if they're not addressed. So, clear playbooks in place for addressing these things that are actually actioned, is part of the answer for solving this problem. So trust is, for me, it's one of the key tenets for managing customers. Trust, I always say this to folks that work for me, trust is hard to get, really easy to lose, and much, much harder to get back once you've lost it. So I always operate from that mindset. So ways I've thought of over the years on how to detect trust failures sooner. And so, we've got all these metrics that we historically have used, NPS, CSAT, a number of escalations through support, etc. Unfortunately, all of those are trailing indicators. And by the time you hear enough of them, that drift is already in full flight, right? And so, we've got to figure out ways to get earlier in the process, in the signal detection. And this is all heading towards the use of AI to do that, because today to do it is incredibly expensive and manual. So one of the things to do that I've done before AI is to move to a much richer cadence of customer review. And it takes a lot in the old days, when you actually had to do all this stuff manually. It takes a lot of work to do that, but it's really one of the best tools to get under the covers of what's happening with customers.
And Eric, do you have
Yeah.
either a story or any advice on every business is different, right?
Yeah.
But like, either a cadence that you've seen be successful in a certain type of business, perhaps based on industry or, ACV or something. And then I'm also just wondering about that team sport. Like, do you deliberately make those cross-functional so that everybody's got some skin in the game?
The cross-functional bit is where the money is. I think getting cross-functional folks to commit to a weekly cadence is hard. Most cross-functional teams, to be perfectly blunt, don't want to do it.
Hmm.
And so, but that's where the money is, because that's where the news gets heard right up front, and that's where commitment needs to be made and follow through happens on, this customer has found this bug. They've said repeatedly, it's sorry to be picking on product folks, but they've said repeatedly it's a tough workaround and it's making the use of your product unpleasant. And we know where that's going to go. Like, we've all seen it, we know where it's going to end up, and the product team needs to commit to getting it fixed. So I think hearing those signals early and often is critical to getting that trust detection happening and then seeing the action on the backside. All right, so here's what the data shows about where trust is happening. I mean, the risk is happening for customers. So Sturdy AI did a poll for almost 50 million account conversations, and you can see where the data is here. The surprise for me seeing this, I mean, the product gap's not that big of a surprise to me because having sat so close to it for so long. But the sales and marketing piece, that was a surprise that it was such a big percentage. I don't know how folks feel about seeing this data now for real, but this, I don't know which business this is, the 47 million signals, what business it came from. They didn't publish that, but it's pretty compelling to see this data. Thoughts, comments, anyone?
It's where sales is under so much pressure these days. And again, based on my calls over the past year, is they don't want to sell what's on the truck. Okay. And what they're doing is they're selling, they're selling futures, unfortunately. And the deal gets closed and the shit falls on the product team and on the customer success team. And I think this is going to get worse.
Yeah. Well, it I hate to contradict you, but it may actually get better. With
I hope so.
well, here's why. So the ability of teams to use AI to generate code is it's something we've never seen before, right? It's the amount of code that can get generated now is per engineer is crazy. And so hopefully that gap shrinks. But you and I worked at the company you mentioned earlier, Rob. Our CEO and sales team was selling, a release and a half ahead of what was available. And, that made it difficult on the customer upside for sure. All right. So why do customers miss churn signals? And some of this will probably be obvious, but they don't miss because they don't care. They miss because they don't have a system built to catch the data. When ownership is split, everyone's doing their bit, but nobody's accountable for the full customer outcome. And that sentence is critical to solving this problem. No one's accountable for the full customer outcome. CS, as I've said, they're leading the charge, but they can't make tech ops run production better. They can't fix bugs. They can't deliver features when we said we would. They can't sell what's on the truck, as Rob said. Um, and then, if your CS team is playing a support role, their opportunity to get ahead of problems and manage their customers is diminished pretty significantly. If they're spending their days firefighting, no matter how many playbooks you have, no matter how well you've written down exactly what you want them to do in certain situations, if they're firefighting day to day, it's almost impossible for them to execute. So where does that lead us? It leads us to a maturity model that, I think for a lot of teams will be helpful. I'm not going to get into the covers about what's under all the items in each one of these maturity models today, obviously. But it's a practical way to see where you fit and see how you can improve by looking at the things in the next pillar to sort of start bringing into your shop. Early stages. If you've worked at a startup, it's survival mode. Lots of reacting, lots of manual work, occasionally writing things down, and learning about risk and issues when they become most painful. As you start to move up the curve, you get some consistency. Then eventually you get to proactive, and eventually you get to predictability. But I've seen very few companies actually get there. It's a lot of work and a lot of time and effort to get to that fourth pillar. But most orgs live in the middle somewhere. You've got some processes, some dashboards, some playbooks, but not enough consistency to prevent surprises. It's quite normal. I'm sure most of you have lived in that world. And while you're working through these things, I think folks eventually get to a place where they feel like they've achieved status quo and they don't need to dig anymore to improve. And that's the fallacy. We've all got to get better every day. The law of marginal gains, 1% better every day leads to a lot of gains at the end of every year, right? So, on the maturity pillar side, these are the failure points that determine whether trust holds. Onboarding execution, product experience, support, and reliability, and promise integrity. If one of these is weak, CS ends up doing heroics. If you strengthen each of these, if you strengthen your weakest pillar here, that frees up CS to do other work, relationship building. And so there's a lot of meat behind these pillars, and we're going to cover a little bit of that now. I'm not going to get too far into the weeds because we're going to run out of time, unfortunately.
Yeah, Eric, just a quick question on the pillars.
Yeah.
Do I speak a lot with companies and funding, and are they just not funding this? I mean, right now you're showing you get to manage, and that's kind of good enough.
Yeah.
But obviously with churn as it is and the impact of AI exacerbating churn, what's the funding situation? I mean, what do you see? You advise a lot of organizations on this. So is it a funding issue?
You've hit the nail on the head. It's exactly what it is. It's a funding issue. 100%. Most executive teams view funding as dollar out, $2 back, right? That's where they're trying to get to. And so, spending money to move up to fully proactive it's not new dollars coming in the door. It may be a net outflow, but that's not how folks think about it. And that's the discussion that you have. To sort of convince teams that a little more funding is going to result in a net gain because there'll be less dollars flowing out the door eventually.
Thanks.
Does that make sense?
Yep. Thank you.
Hey, Eric, is just in these maturity pillars, is there any factor around where CS reports in to the
Uh,
business?
oh, great question, Pam. Yeah, I think um, CS over the last, I'd say, 4 or 5 years has slowly shifted more towards being, a revenue organization and moving under sales. And from my chair, that is a mistake because that means that the leadership of that team now is mostly concerned about maintaining maintaining revenue and expansions. And you can't get like that's the result of doing all the other problem solving and relationship building and trust repair that needs to be happening. And it's now like we've sort of shifted the cart and the horse, I think, in some ways.
So optimally, if you could choose, where would you have it report?
I think if the business is small enough, to the CEO, a large business, the COO.
Mm, got it. Okay, thanks.
All right, onboarding on your left. As we talked about, it's the first credibility test. Customers are deciding early whether their relationship with you is going to be easy or painful. And if they don't get to meaningful value quickly, every setback after that gets bigger, feels bigger. The patience gets thinner. Uh, that's why thinking in not checklists in outcomes is so critical. And sometimes the predetermined outcomes aren't the right outcomes for that customer. And that's a conversation that needs to happen as part of the onboarding because they may have a sort of, you know, um, a bit of a unicorn reason for using your product. And if you don't know that early on, they're going to get frustrated. So, um, on the right, you get product experience. The other half of the story, reliability, performance. They're not just technical details; they're relationship signals. Um, I'm sure most of you have worked in a business where production ops has struggled at times. You aren't hitting your 3 nines, 4 nines goal, and customers are very frustrated. It's a little flattering to hear how aggravated customers get when your product's not available, but not if you're the CS team. It's not. Um, and those obstacles, as they happen over time, what happens is they reduce adoption. They reduce usage, and ultimately they create doubt in whether you're the right partner for them. And the key to getting through that friction zone, if you will, is with telemetry, and that can be baked in to your products by your product and engineering team, or there's add-ons like Pendo that we'll talk about a bit later that you can get, but that telemetry is critical to understanding which parts of the product people are using, which parts they're struggling with, which parts they never touch that you've invested huge amounts of money in. Um, but if you don't solve those problems, you end up where those trust withdrawals are happening, and eventually the bank gets empty, and that customer is moving to one of your competitors.
Yeah, so Bob brought up a point. He said, I find it interesting how people overlook the training team where CS is concerned. The team is critical in reducing churn and bringing customer data back to the company. Thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's again, I like using this word missed opportunity. The business that Rob was alluding to earlier that Rob and I were at, one of the things that we did there because that my team was incredibly small, only a few people, and so different hour, different hat, and we brought the product team in to talk to customers, and eventually we got probably about half our customer base on a weekly or biweekly call with someone from our product team to hear all these friction points and to get their most important issues surfaced and let the product team hear firsthand why they were so important. And that level of engagement is at more mature businesses is really hard to replicate. But some level of it, I think, needs to be happening to connect the dots from training with a through line from training through the customer right to product. Maybe training's not training right, and product will eventually, that loop will get closed that way. But maybe there's a gap in functionality where you've released MVP and they really need MVP.2, and that through loop gets closed to the product team, and maybe that reprioritizes some work that is ongoing.
Get a couple other comments in the chat. We'll get to Michael's in just a second, but Dana's, I think, is a good follow-on to what you were just talking about, right? Which is the integrating the partner support, partner success into the model. If you've got a big, channel business or, some of your big customers that way, and curious to your experiences and best practices there.
Yeah, I think in bigger businesses, that sort of microcosm that I just described is what should be happening in bigger businesses for your premier customers. That loop should be happening for those businesses because that's where a significant portion of your overall revenue is coming from. And the reality is, most software businesses don't operate that way, and doing it is a completely different experience for your customer. They get to talk to the people that actually solve their problems. It's this amazing epiphany that customers feel, and you can see the energy, the mood, and the joy that the customer gets to have by talking to the product person who understands deeply the code, everything about what they're trying to do, and then comes back in a few weeks and says, "Hey, here's a mock-up of what we're thinking to solve this problem. What do you think?" It's an incredible opportunity that I think folks should take advantage of.
That's great. And a follow-on from Dana here in the chat, do you have a sense for what level of partner revenue or percentage of the business for these larger SaaS providers, makes sense for this partner support, partner success? Do you think, is there a rule of thumb you've seen work well?
I don't. I think it depends on the. This is a numbers game. How many meetings can your partner success and your product team take on per month? I think that's where you start, Dana, and then try to run the numbers backwards.
Yeah, great. Why don't you continue with the pillars? I do want to get to Michael's question because I think it's fascinating because it's almost like customer success in reverse, like how you can take it. That's the way I'm reading it. So how you can maybe take advantage of a new business opportunity because your competitor is not doing a good job of customer success. But let's finish your pillars and then maybe we can dive into that.
Yeah. So these two pillars are really about trust. When the customer's under stress, and stress happens every day in our business, right? There's always something going on, some bug, some unexpected event. Customers don't expect perfection, but they expect you to be responsive and accountable and follow through with transparency about what they've encountered. The last business I was at, we had an event where it was a regulated business. We were storing patient data for one patient under the record of another patient. And this bug had been loose for about 12 hours before we discovered it. And we had to go back and tell all the customers that had logged in that day that their data was in need of repair. And, that was not a fun day, not fun messaging, but as we worked through it, all those customers came back to me and said how appreciative they were that we reacted as fast as we could, that we were transparent about what we're doing, and took full ownership, and eventually we solved their problem. It took, in some cases, a few weeks to get this problem unwound, but we ended up having daily meetings for them, and in the end, it was a net positive. So
that's a great story because obviously that could have been disastrous, right? In this
100%. And if word got out that we had reacted poorly because all the customers of that business talk, we would have been in real trouble. All right, so I've gotten the speed up message from Mr. Champa. So on the support and reliability side, the one of the most important things here is, root cause analysis and problem solving to kill problems where they stand so they don't happen again. A lot of business I've been at do this. They're pretty good at it. If your business isn't good at it, get really great at it. It's a way to sort of take things off the plate, and then you can go cheer to your customer that, hey, we heard you, we solved your problem, we're moving on to the next thing. It's really a way to build trust that you're really listening. On the promise integrity side, this is churn prevention before it starts, right? As Rob said, sell what's on the truck, not what's coming off the truck. Or if you are selling what's coming off the truck soon, be transparent about when it's coming. And then your engineering team's got to deliver. Because sometimes it's required because that customer won't buy unless that thing comes off the truck. And so, but you got to tell them it's not off the truck just yet. So there's opportunity here on education and self-serving technical solutions for customers. But there's got to be consistency across all the teams. One of the things that I almost every business I've had, if you went and asked individual contributors and all the teams we've been talking about, what value is for customers, you get 5 different answers or 6 different answers. And I think that's an interesting internal marketing idea, Rob, that I think most teams don't take advantage of.
Agreed.
And I think if you ask most folks in customer ops, especially in the weeds folks, support folks who are talking to customers all the day, service delivery teams that are delivering, like, they're gonna have different answers. And it's wild that that problem hasn't been solved yet for me. Oop. All right, so this goes back to earlier slide we talked about, but customers are using AI to do evaluations of every product that is in their house now. And if they aren't doing it right this minute, by the end of this year, their customers are going to have thrown a prompt together, thrown it in, Chat GPT to ask if there's better options. If there's alternative ways to solve the problem that they've got other than using your product. And so that's what Rob was mentioning earlier, that your business is under so much pressure because of the tools now available. So I think transparency is critical about where you are, what's on the truck, and the opportunity here isn't to scare folks to say, hey, retaining customers is near impossible because they can switch at any time. It's really a forcing function to push us to be better, build real knowledge systems that folks can solve their own problems, tighten how we explain value, improve workflows, and shorten the time between signal appearing and company responding. In the AI age, the fastest path to trust is clarity. I've heard a lot of arguments in the last year that CS is going away, support's going away. I don't think either of those two things are true. I think there's an opportunity to maybe reduce a seat in one or two of those orgs, one or both of those orgs. But I think overall, at least the way I frame this in my brain is, humans are great at judgment, empathy, trust building and repair, and cross-functional alignment, and AI is really great at signal detection, summarization, document creation, next best action, all the legwork that CS teams have been doing historically. Really significant portion of that can be driven through AI, and it's work to get there, but there's definitely an opportunity to reduce the quote grunt work for CS teams, which will enable them to do higher level work. I wrote in my notes when I was thinking about this slide. You know, um, if you think AI is going to replace the human side, and do it successfully, just call your credit card company and don't hit zero to speak to a person. See if you get your problem solved. Um, all right. So here's MVP for post sales architecture. This is obviously very high level and intended to be so just due to time constraints. But you need some data repository to hold this data for small businesses. My advice is use the CRM you've already got plugged in, or unless it's terrible, and then upgrade your CRM. It's the easiest way to get started, and start building some AI chops. Most of the CRMs today have they've started to build in AI tools. Certainly, all the big ones have that now. Some of them are graduating into Agentville, where they've got some agent capabilities as well. But after you've got the data foundation, you need orchestration and workflow. Again, some of these companies have those features built in. There are add-ons, obviously, that you can layer in, and we'll get to some ideas around that in a minute.
Yeah, just a comment, Eric. I think this is a huge point. I think the reason we have so much tech stack baggage is that every time we have an issue, we're going to go and buy yet another non-integratable product that doesn't get used and gets whacked. You get whacked on the head of the board meeting because you're not using the product. The key is, and I think what's really important about this point is you've got it already. The AI work you can do sits on top of this, and the teams can do it. So great point.
Yeah, it is. I think once you get past a certain company size, I think then it might make sense to look outside sort of these tools, because if you're building your own agents natively, the world is your oyster. You can build whatever you need. But there's a cost hit associated with that. You're probably going to need an FTE that's really great at writing code and writing agents. And until you cross that sort of revenue barrier where that makes financial sense, sitting on top of your CRM makes all the sense in the world. And so the last bit here, is around governance. Obviously, you've got to make sure all this stuff works. And, I put some metrics on here, GRR, NRR. There's probably other metrics that you've got that are favorites. Whatever those are, use those to monitor the work you're doing under the covers, so that you can ensure that the investment you're making is paying off. All right. So I'm not going to spend too much time on the slide, but here's some products, and I would say, as I mentioned, this is for smaller businesses, maybe some early mid markets, that you could focus on to sort of get started. There's the products that are there, some of the highlights. Hopefully there's no huge surprises on here for folks. If there are, then great. Maybe you get a takeaway. But there's a number of things that aren't on here, which are things like, and this is almost certainly we'd have to go outside of these core products to sort of gain this advantage. But QBR deck agent, renewal prep agent, you can build that on Salesforce and HubSpot and a few others. Sentiment agent, that functionality is coming online in some of the bigger tools, which is great. Theme scout agent, like what kind of themes are we seeing around support, as opposed to the anecdotal work that inevitably happens with support teams. So there's an opportunity to get even deeper with not a huge amount of work. All right. And so here's the sort of flow of how you'd sort of go about sort of taking on some of this work. Signal instrumentation's, obviously critical. Without the data behind the scenes, you can't do any of this signal detection work that you're going to end up running through a sentiment agent, for example. And all that data, if you're thoughtful, is going to be in places that's easy to get access to it. And so, you see a lot of teams now starting to move towards all communication with my customer goes into my CRM tool, so that it's easy to have access to that data, all the meeting notes, using a tool like Gong or whatever. All the notes go in there again. So you've got almost a central repository. Now there are expensive central repository things like Snowflake where you can embed data, but the easiest way to get started, just use the CRM tools you've already got. Once you get the data, and you've gone through that sort of signal review, then you've got an opportunity to do risk detection and start using AI to sort of listen better and earlier to what's happening. And the old model, we meet once a month, we talk about what's happening with customers, and then we service that to company leadership. It's just going to put folks behind the 8 ball.
Yeah, Eric, I know we're pressed for time, but Michael has a good question that I'll augment a little bit. He said, "Do you recommend post-churn customer interviews from external entities?" And so, is it worth talking to people who've left? And ideally, do you use AI to analyze, some of that? That's what my augmentation is. Is it worth it?
Uh, the post-departure interview, 100%, it's worth it. Some customers aren't willing to do it, but I would 100% do it. The external bit, I'm on the fence about it. I frankly prefer, if I'm being honest, to do it myself because I get to ask all the questions. But it depends on the size of your business. If you've got a much bigger business, that might make more sense. And then you've got a somewhat disinterested third party sort of running that call. The downside is they don't know your functionality very well. They don't know that the reason this customer left is because function X doesn't work the way they expected, and we never told them it would. We never expected it to, and so you lose that nuance from someone internally who knows your stack and your functionality.
All right, thanks, Eric. I know we got about a couple minutes left, so I'll let you wrap up, and we'll can the questions for now.
I got one more slide. Did Rob say it was going to be homework this week? Because here's the homework. So, here's a few things that you might think about doing this week or within the next few weeks. Pick some signals to review on a regular basis if you aren't doing that yet. Standardize, add some play standardization somewhere where you need some help. Start your journey on AI if you haven't already, or pick something to accelerate. I think the opportunity to do this stuff is here. AI is not an experiment anymore. Your competitors are using it, and the folks that delay are going to they're going to fall behind. Okay, Rob, lots of questions now. Go.
All right, we've taken a bunch of them. So this is a way to get in touch with Eric. So Eric, big thanks. Again, I think for those of us who've been in sales and marketing, we just haven't invested appropriately in are working with our customer success. Obviously, you and I have, and it made a hell of a difference. But this is really, really key insight. So I want to turn it back and thank you, Eric, on behalf of everybody. I want to turn it over to Pam for a couple of closing announcements. But thanks for being proactive. You gave everybody some homework. There should be no excuses. You get enough tools to do it, and you don't have to go and spend another $100,000 on a new tool set. So, Pam, back over to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Just to echo what you said, Rob, I mean, we always try to, with these SAMI sessions, what can you do at 9:01 when this call ends? So Eric gave you your homework and some really tangible things we can all be doing in sales and marketing to start to get better at all this. So Eric, I'll just echo Rob's thanks. Appreciate you being here today. The recording will be available next week in the meetup group. So if you're registered for this, you'll get a ping about the link so that you can watch it again or listen to bits of it. We have our next SAMI session lined up for exactly 1 month from today, Thursday, March 19th. And that one's going to be on synthetic buyers, the future of testing messaging before you spend, featuring Luca Fiasci. And this one's going to be interesting because this is, again, I'm going to put the link right here in chat so you can sign up for that if you haven't already. We're going to showcase one of the emerging use cases for AI that's really gaining a lot of steam. So imagine the speed and agility of being able to test your messaging and all these messaging iterations with your ICP without assembling a survey, without conducting an expensive focus group, and really kind of tweak on the fly. So fascinating topic. It's gaining a lot of attention. You do not want to miss that one. So thanks to all of you for joining us. Hopefully we'll see you in March. And Eric, again, one final thank you from everybody here at SAMI. And I hope everybody has a wonderful day ahead.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Oops.